Welcome to our YouTube channel, The Alien Tales, and please ensure that you have subscribed.
The alien composer writes our relationship as a symphony. The final movement is unfinished. Each phase of our love becomes a musical movement. The last piece remains incomplete. She says she'll know how it ends when one of us dies. The coffee shop Wi-Fi had been acting up for 3 days when Thessaly Okonkwo first heard the music. Not through speakers, through her bones, her teeth, the hollow spaces behind her ribs. She'd been debugging code for her dating app startup, ironically titled Match Made in Heaven, when harmonies she'd never heard began composing themselves in her skull. "Excuse me," said a voice like silver wind chimes having an existential crisis. "Are you experiencing unauthorized auditory phenomena?" Thessaly looked up to find the most beautiful woman she'd ever seen. If women typically had skin that shifted between lavender and pearl depending on the angle of fluorescent lighting. The stranger wore vintage human clothes, a 1950s dress that somehow made her 7-foot frame look elegant rather than awkward. "You mean the music that's apparently living rent-free in my brain?" Thessaly gestured vaguely at her skull. "Yeah, that's new." The woman smiled, revealing teeth like perfect opals. "I am Quilandra 7 notes spast the edge of sorrow. My friends call me Quill. I'm what you might term a musical anthropologist." "Thessaly, I build apps that help humans find love, which is currently as successful as teaching quantum physics to goldfish." "Fascinating. Your species' approach to romantic compatibility is charmingly inefficient." Quill tilted her head, and the music in Thessaly's mind shifted to a playful waltz. "I compose symphonies about the relationships I observe. Your neural patterns are particularly melodious." "Are you saying you're writing music about me?" "Not about you. About us." Quill's skin shimmered rose gold. "The first movement has already begun." The cafe suddenly felt smaller, charged with possibility and impending cosmic complications. 3 weeks later, Thessaly had grown accustomed to having her emotional state broadcast in surround sound through her cranium. Quill explained that Orwellian composers, her species, experienced relationships through musical interpretation, each phase corresponding to classical earth movements they'd studied. "This is the courting minuet," Quill said, demonstrating a graceful gesture that made Thessaly's heart perform gymnastics. They sat in Thessaly's apartment, which now featured several crystalline instruments that hummed when touched. "Very formal, very... what's your word? Proper." "Nothing about this is proper," Thessaly laughed, watching Quill attempt to eat pizza with utensils designed for creatures with 3-jointed fingers. "You're an alien writing a musical interpretation of our relationship, while I'm trying not to spontaneously combust every time you smile. Your species has such colorful expressions for emotional overwhelm. My species has trust issues with interdimensional beings who collect love stories." Quill's expression grew serious, her skin shifting to deep violet. "I don't collect them, Thessaly. I preserve them. Love is the most complex music in any universe. Mathematical, emotional, chaotic, perfect. Most species experience it. Few understand its musical architecture. And what happens when the symphony ends? All symphonies end eventually." Quill's fingers hovered over a crystal that resonated with melancholy. "But the music echoes forever." The minuet in Thessaly's mind crescendoed to something bittersweet, and she realized she was already dreading the silence that would come after. The apartment's lights flickered, and outside, something that looked suspiciously like a spaceship cast shadows through the blinds. "Your bedroom activities are surprisingly percussive," Quill observed the next morning, her skin cycling through colors Thessaly had no names for. "Please tell me you're not scoring our sex life." Thessaly pulled on her shirt, trying to process the cosmic awkwardness of post-coital conversation with an interdimensional composer. "The third movement is always passionate allegro. It's unavoidable musical law." Quill stretched, her spine making sounds like wind through cathedral pipes. "Though your technique with that thing you did with your... Do not analyze my technique like it's a violin solo, more like aggressive percussion. Very rhythmic. Surprisingly inventive for a species with only 4 limbs." Thessaly threw a pillow at her, which Quill caught with reflexes that suggested her homeworld had different gravity. The music in Thessaly's head had evolved into something primal and complex, full of racing heartbeats and synchronized breathing. "Can other people hear this?" Thessaly asked. "Because Mrs. Chun next door has been giving me weird looks. Only those emotionally connected to the composition's subjects." "Though," Quill paused, her skin flickering between silver and gold. "There might be other Orvelians monitoring my work. Other aliens are eavesdropping on our relationship through interdimensional music. Academic peer review is universal, apparently." Before Thessaly could respond, her phone buzzed with 17 missed calls from her sister, 3 from her boss, and 1 text that read, "Emergency family dinner. Bring whoever's been making you glow. Mom's suspicious." Outside, the definitely not a weather balloon had moved closer to her building. "Your family unit is delightfully chaotic," Quill whispered as Thessaly's nephew, 8-year-old Brandon, attempted to teach her patty cake with the intensity of a military drill sergeant. They'd been dating 6 months. The music had settled into what Quill called domestic pastorale. Gentle, everyday melodies punctuated by moments of pure joy. Thessaly's sister Maya had surprisingly taken the My Girlfriend is an interdimensional musical anthropologist revelation better than expected, mostly because Quill helped Brandon with his science project by creating a working model of the solar system using crystalline resonance. "Brandon, stop trying to make Quill's skin change colors on command," Maya called from the kitchen. "But she turns purple when she's embarrassed," Brandon protested. "That's private, buddy." Thessaly ruffled his hair, then noticed Quill had gone completely translucent. "Oh, Orvelian camouflage response," Quill mumbled, slowly fading back to visibility. "Your juvenile human was correct about the embarrassment correlation. Can you teach me to do that?" Brandon asked eagerly. "Only if you promise to use it for good and not for sneaking extra cookies." "I make no such promises." The evening progressed with alarming normalcy until dessert, when Maya casually mentioned that someone from the government had been asking questions about unusual energy signatures in the neighborhood. Quill's skin went from pearl to deep crimson. "Define someone from the government," Thessaly said slowly. "Tall woman, weird accent, claimed to be from the Department of Atmospheric Irregularities." Maya paused. Also, she knew about the music. Through the window, they could see 3 definitely not weather balloons hovering over the subdivision. "Department of Atmospheric Irregularities isn't a real government agency," Thessaly said, pacing her living room while Quill frantically tuned her crystalline instruments. The music in her head had become jagged, discordant, all wrong angles and sharp edges. "No, but the Department of Xenological Cultural Preservation is," Quill replied, her skin cycling through anxiety patterns that looked like Aurora Borealis having a nervous breakdown. "They monitor Orvelian artistic endeavors on primitive worlds." "Primitive?" Thessaly stopped pacing. "Excuse me, musically primitive. Your species has barely discovered electronic synthesis. We have Beethoven, yes, very cute, like a child drawing stick figures before learning perspective." The music crescendoed into what felt like an argument between orchestras. Through it, Thessaly could hear actual footsteps on her fire escape. "They think I'm violating the non-interference protocol by creating symphonic documentation of indigenous relationship patterns," Quill continued, her instruments beginning to emit warning harmonics. "Apparently, composing love stories about native species is considered cultural appropriation. So you're in trouble for dating me? I'm in trouble for making beautiful music about dating you. The dating itself is technically legal. How reassuring." The window shattered as Agent Cordelia Blackthorne of the Definitely Real DXCP rappelled through it, wearing a suit that cost more than Thessaly's car and an expression that suggested she found interdimensional romance personally offensive. "Ms. Quillander 7 notes past the edge of sorrow," she said in a voice like ice cubes in expensive whiskey. "You're under arrest for artistic violations of Section 847B. Unauthorized symphonic documentation of indigenous emotional patterns." The music in Thessaly's head reached a crescendo that felt like the universe having a panic attack. "Run," Quill said, grabbing Thessaly's hand as Agent Blackthorne pulled out what looked like a tuning fork designed by someone who took geometry too personally. They bolted for the back door as crystalline instruments shattered like musical grenades behind them. The fugue in Thessaly's mind became a rapid-fire exchange of melodies. Her panic, Quill's determination, and something else that sounded suspiciously like heroic adventure music. Your species has an impressive capacity for cardiovascular exertion under stress, Quill observed as they vaulted over Mrs. Chen's fence. Less compliments, more running, Thessaly gasped. Behind them, Agent Blackthorn emerged from the apartment building with backup. 3 more suits and what appeared to be a portable interdimensional containment unit that hummed with malevolent efficiency. The park, Quill said, pointing toward the wooded area beyond the residential streets. My ship is cloaked there. You have a ship? How did you think I got here? Public transportation. They reached the tree line as energy bolts that sounded like disappointed opera singers began zapping the ground around their feet. The music had become a full chase sequence. All racing violins and thunderous percussion that made Thessaly's heart feel like it might explode from either terror or exhilaration. There, Quill pointed to what looked like empty air but shimmered if Thessaly squinted right. They dove through what felt like walking through a soap bubble, and suddenly they were inside something that looked like a concert hall designed by architects who'd never heard of right angles. Welcome aboard the Melodic Convergence, Quill said, her hands flying over controls that were definitely musical instruments. Please keep all limbs inside the vehicle during interdimensional travel. The ship lifted off just as Agent Blackthorn's face appeared pressed against what Thessaly hoped was a window. Space, it turned out, was cold in ways that had nothing to do with temperature. They'd been hiding in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter for 3 weeks, and the music in Thessaly's head had shifted to something that sounded like homesickness played on instruments made of crystallized tears. The nocturne movement, Quill explained, her skin maintaining a steady blue-gray that matched the ship's melancholy lighting. Separation, longing, the pain of displacement. How long can we stay here? Thessaly asked, staring at Earth through the observation deck's transparent aluminum. Her planet looked impossibly small and fragile from this distance. Until the DXCP stops monitoring Earth's musical frequencies. Could be decades. Decades. Thessaly's voice cracked. I can't stay in space for decades. I have a company to run, a family, student loans that won't forgive themselves. I know. Quill's voice carried harmonics of regret that resonated through the ship's hull. I should never have let myself compose about you. Should have observed from a distance, written theoretical pieces about human emotion without involving actual humans. But then we wouldn't have met. Then you wouldn't be exiled from your home world because of my artistic ambitions. The ship's communication system chimed with an incoming message from Agent Blackthorn, her face appearing on a screen that looked like it was made of crystallized sound waves. Ms. Okonkwo, she said with professional courtesy that felt somehow more threatening than anger. The department would like to discuss terms for your safe return to Earth. Quill moved to switch off the communication, but Thessaly stopped her. What kind of terms? Thessaly asked. The kind that involve choices neither of you will like making. Agent Blackthorn materialized aboard the Melodic Convergence in a way that suggested teleportation was just another Tuesday for the Department of Xenological Cultural Preservation. She wore the same expensive suit but had traded her intimidating expression for something approaching diplomatic neutrality. The department is prepared to offer Ms. Okonkwo safe passage back to Earth, she began, settling into a chair that reformed itself to accommodate human physiology. In exchange for the complete musical documentation of your relationship. The music in Thessaly's head went completely silent for the first time in months. You want the symphony, Quill said, her skin cycling through what Thessaly had learned was the Orwellian equivalent of profanity. We want all of it. Every movement, every harmonic progression, every emotional crescendo. It would become property of the department's archive of prohibited artistic documentation. Locked away forever, Thessaly translated. Preserved for academic study, Agent Blackthorn corrected. Your relationship has produced some of the most complex emotional music we've encountered. It would be wasteful to let it simply echo into cosmic background radiation. Quill stood abruptly, her instruments beginning to resonate with agitation. The symphony isn't finished. The final movement remains unwritten, which brings us to our second condition. Agent Blackthorn's smile could have cut glass. The relationship must end. Permanently. No contact between species. No further musical development. No additional movements to complicate our archive. You're asking us to break up so you can steal our love story, Thessaly said. I'm offering you the chance to preserve it forever while preventing further violations of interspecies artistic protocols. Outside the ship, asteroids drifted past like cosmic punctuation marks in a sentence no one knew how to finish. There has to be another option, Thessaly said for the 15th time in 2 hours. Agent Blackthorn had left them alone to discuss terms, but the communication remained open, a constant reminder that their time was running out. Quill sat at her largest instrument, fingers moving across crystalline keys that produced sounds like the aurora borealis learning to sing. The music she created was improvisational, unstructured, what she called a cadenza, a solo section where the composer could explore emotional territory without formal constraints. I could claim artistic immunity, Quill said slowly. Orwellian law protects the right to complete unfinished works. But that would mean, what? I would have to finish the symphony, the final movement. And I told you, I can only write the ending when one of us. She trailed off, her skin going pale as starlight. Dies. Thessaly finished the sentence. When one of us dies, it's not literal death necessarily, but the end of us. The death of what we are together. The ship's atmosphere felt heavier suddenly, as if gravity had increased along with the weight of their impossible choice. Through the observation deck, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, oblivious to the cosmic bureaucracy threatening to tear apart its daughter's interdimensional love affair. What if we wrote the ending ourselves? Thessaly asked suddenly. Not death, not separation, but transformation. Evolution. Quill's fingers stopped moving across the keys. I mean, what if the final movement isn't about ending, but about becoming something new? Something the department can't classify or control. Agent Blackthorn's voice crackled through the communication system. You have 1 hour to decide. The music in Thessaly's head began building toward something unprecedented. Not an ending, but a beginning disguised as a conclusion. Agent Blackthorn, Thessaly said as the department official rematerialized in the ship's main chamber. We accept your terms, with one modification. The agent's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in her professional composure they'd seen. The department doesn't negotiate modifications to standard agreements. Then you're going to miss out on the most extraordinary musical documentation in your archive. Quill stood beside Thessaly, her skin shifting through patterns that looked like sheet music written in light. Because we're offering you something unprecedented. A symphony that finishes by remaining unfinished. Explain. Thessaly took Quill's hand, and the music in her head transformed into something that sounded like every love song ever written playing simultaneously, creating harmony instead of chaos. Love isn't a story with an ending. It's a continuous composition. The final movement of our symphony isn't meant to conclude. It's meant to evolve, to keep writing itself across time and space and dimension. A musical perpetual motion machine, Quill added, her instruments beginning to resonate with the concept. Theoretically impossible, practically inevitable. The department could study it forever and never fully catalog its permutations. Agent Blackthorn was quiet for a long moment, her expression cycling through what might have been surprise, professional interest, and something that looked suspiciously like artistic appreciation. The relationship continues? She asked finally. The relationship transcends, Thessaly corrected. No longer bound by single-species limitations or interdimensional protocols. We become the music. And I, Quill said, her skin now shifting through every color in several spectrums, become the first Orwellian composer to create a truly infinite symphony. Outside the ship, space itself seemed to hold its breath as the music in Thessaly's head crescendoed toward forever. Each note a promise that some stories are too beautiful to end. They simply learn new ways to begin. Agent Blackthorn smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. The department accepts your proposal. Welcome to the archive of impossible things. The symphony played on, unfinished and infinite, writing itself across the cosmos one perfect, imperfect note at a time. Author's note. The final movement remains unwritten not because the story lacks an ending, but because some loves are meant to be eternal rough drafts, always becoming, never quite finished, forever beautiful in their incompleteness.